Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. This episode we have Netflix 322nd film from 2020. It's the Italian comedy drama called Rose Island, or L'incredibile storia dell'lsola delle rose. It's directed by Sydney Sibilia and stars Elio Germano, Matilda De Angelis, Leonardo Lidi, Fabrizio Bentivoglio, Luca, Zingaretti, and Francois Cluzet. I'm Jesse, I'm your host. I think I did an okay job with the cast there, with my little fake Italian accent. So as always, thanks for coming along on this adventure, on this ride. As always too, we do put out a spoiler alert, so if you haven't seen Rose Island and this is a film that you seem to be interested in, want to check it out, give us a pause and come back later on, because we do start the show with the fast flicks, where we do a quick little summary of what the film is all about. So this one is about a man who is sick and tired of society's rules, so he wants to build his own territory where he can do what he wants. As I've sort of touched on, it's going to be very hard to talk about this film without spoiling the whole story. So this is based on a real story, based on real life. If you know the real life story, what I'm going to talk about isn't really going to faze you at all. However, I went into this film without knowing anything about this film, so I think I probably enjoyed it more not knowing anything about it. So again, this is the last chance. Pause and come back later, because we're going to talk about how this ended up on Netflix and the real life story that it's actually based on. So as I said, big spoiler, but this is based on the actual Republic of Rose Island, which was a short-lived micronation on a man-made platform in the Adriatic Sea, which was 11 k's or 6.8 miles off the coast of the province of Emilia-Romagna in Italy, which was built by this Italian engineer called Giorgio Rosa, who made himself its president and declared it an independent state on the 1st of May 1968. Although Rose Island had its own government, currency, post office, commercial establishment, and it had its own, or the official language was Esperanto, it was never formally recognized as a sovereign state by any country of the world. The Italian government viewed this island as a ploy by Rosa to raise money from tourists while avoiding national taxation. So Rose Island was occupied by Italian police forces on the 26th of June 1968, and there was a naval blockade, and they eventually demolished it in February of 1969. The Italian government, they tried to disassemble the island, but it was impossible, so they needed to bomb it. And the reality, they needed 2 very hard bombings of the island to destroy it. And after that, the government actually sent Giorgio the bill for the war, and people have actually seen the receipts that the Italian government sent. So part of that true story. And this is all a part of the film as well, but the authorities made moves to make sure this didn't happen again, and the UN changed the boundaries of territorial waters from the 6 to 11 nautical miles across the world. And the destruction of Rose Island was the first and only war of aggression of Italy. After World War II, Italy has never attacked any country except this island. And this is obviously all in the end credits of the film as well. The actual film, or the creation of this island, the actual island was shot in an infinity pool in Malta. So obviously much shallower water than they had in real life, and obviously made it easier. And they do a really good job with it, and obviously lots of manpower went into creating this set, other than a few people doing it in real life. The film's director, Sydney Sibilia, first actually met the real life Rosa when he was 92 years old in his hometown of Bologna. And the first question that the director asked was, "Why did you build that island?" And the answer was, "Why not?" And the director, Sibilia, sort of says this was the perfect starting point for a movie. Sadly, the team, the filmmaking team, only got to meet Giorgio twice before his death in 2017. So the film's producer, Matteo Rivera, described the film as 85% true and 15% invention. So they've tried to stay as true to the story as possible. And if you've seen the film, most of the stuff I'm talking about, you can probably visualize in your mind as well about what happened. So interesting little story about how this all came together. It's based on a real story. It's in Italian. Lots to sort of take out of this one as well. The translations for this one around the world. So the direct Italian title of L'incredibile storia dell'lsola delle rose, it actually means the incredible story of Rose Island. It's got the same name in Spanish, Portuguese, French, German, Norwegian, Russian. In Greek, I like the Greek title. It's called The Floating Nation. That's a good little title. In Japanese, it's called The Republic of Rose Island. Big turbulence on a small island. And I like that too, because this does create turbulence, not just on the island, but on the mainland of Italy as well, that we see throughout the film. This was released on Netflix on the 9th of December 2020. This was pretty successful across the award circuit, across Europe, especially across the Italian festivals. Had 13 wins and a further 23 nominations. I guess the biggest one was the Best Stunt Coordination nomination at the Venice Film Festival too. As mentioned, this had some of the infinity pool scenes done in Malta, also filmed across Italy in the actual town of Rimini, Bologna, and Roma. What are the critics and audiences saying about this film? On Rotten Tomatoes, it sits at 78%. That's on 9 reviews, so that is fresh. Only 9 reviews, though, so, we'll take it as it is. It's not certified. The audience has it about the same, 75%. That's on more than 100 ratings. So compared to some of these international films that we've been looking at lately, a few more people have seen this, and we see this on IMDb. 25,000 ratings. It sits at a solid 7 out of 10 on IMDb. Letterboxd has about 25,000 ratings. It sits at a 3.4 out of 5, and it's actually been logged by 35,000 people. So, again, fairly high numbers. Metacritic, not enough critics on there, but the audience has it at a 7.2 out of 10 on 9 reviews. So, that isn't that green on that traffic light system. So, some fairly positive feedback on this film. I guess that leads us into my early thoughts. What do I think about this film? I think this probably works, and I sort of touched on this at the start of the episode. Probably works more for people who know nothing about the real life events, which is probably tricky because I think this film is targeted to an Italian audience who are probably very aware of the whole scenario. I came in not knowing anything, so I was captivated throughout, even if there were a few laughs and the motivations of the whole scenario were missing. And that sort of goes back to that quote that I spoke about before where, the director of the film asked the real life guy, why did you build the island? And the answer was, why not? That's such a tricky thing to make a 2-hour film about, is you're making this whole idea of these people revolting against the government, people wanting freedom to create their own island, and there's no actual motivation behind it. So that does make it a little bit tricky, but that's not necessarily the filmmaker's fault. All right, let's talk about some characters. So we've touched on a lot of these already, but Giorgio Rosa, this is his film. This is the guy, he doesn't like to follow the norm. He always wants to try new things, challenge himself and others to live by his own rules and his laws, I guess. And this makes him a very isolating person. His parents don't approve of what he does, and he sort of pushed his romantic connection away, who's Gabriella. And we see her throughout. She's almost as ambitious as Giorgio. She's an international law associate student, but she can't deal with him anymore because she sees him as too risky. And there's never a moment in the film where you feel she truly doesn't want to be by his side. She's probably trying to sell herself the idea that she needs to follow rules, follow conventions, and do the right thing by society when she wants to be out there with him, participating in this island. The other person that plays a big part in this film is Maurizio Orlandini, who is Giorgio's best friend. This guy, he works for his own father and doesn't do much himself, as he almost uses and abuses his father's wealth. And we hear he's done working for his father. So in that motivation, that idea of this island is a pull factor for him. And obviously too, we see that he likes a drink, and having this island where there's no taxes, you can do whatever you want, that's going to further continue his drinking habits. And this alcoholism also too means that throughout the film, the government, when they're trying to fight back against this island, they almost ignore him when trying to negotiate with people because they're like, he's just an alcoholic. So that's a little bit of a sad side to his story too. The other big character on the island is Rudy Newman. He's this German club promoter in Italy who gets on board to help make the island the party island central, I guess, that it becomes. And, he doesn't have a German passport anymore because it was ripped up after he went AWOL during World War II. He doesn't have rights in Italy because, he's a foreigner. So this is the perfect fit for him, this island. And I guess the villains in this film are the Italian government, especially Giovanni, this politician set on destroying Giorgio, his idealism, and the island as well. So there's a little wrap of the characters. The director, Sydney Sibilia. Music video clips, some shorts, a few films, including this trilogy of films. I think it's called I Can Quit Whenever I Want. So interesting little catalogue. Decent effort in this film, I would suggest. Let's talk about some scenes. What are some scenes that stood out, some ones that I liked, and what are some ones that possibly didn't work for me? So I think to start off with, Giorgio, he gets his motivation to make this island. His job at the time was working in a pit crew, I guess, or in charge of helping motorcyclists on this racetrack and giving them directions on how to pick their speed up. So there's this moment where he's got this sort of like whiteboard or chalkboard. He goes out on the track to give the rider some instructions on how to pick up the pace, and he loses And it gets distracted by this big billboard, and the driver gets distracted and crashes their motorbike. I thought that was really well shot too, with the focus on him, his sort of inspiration from this poster, and the motorcyclist coming over and losing it at Giorgio too. There's a scene where the Italian government, they send these intelligence agents to the island to check it out, and then they report back and they're drunk and they've cheated on their wives and they're upset. That was quite funny. There's a moment where the Vatican's representative for the Pope speaks to the Italian politicians and talks about the newspapers and how the newspaper coverage of this island has bare asses in the paper, and saying, it's not normal, and it's like, it's not about the ass, it's lovely. This is a priest, and it's like, it represents everything you want. Can you, and then the question is, can you do anything with an ass, or anything you want with an ass? And the response is, no, you can't. So I thought that was quite a funny little moment there too. Giorgio, he goes to see his dad, and we've seen that he has these issues with his parents throughout because they don't support what he's doing. But his dad's fired from his job, and he sits down and he finally supports his son and says, stand up, do what's right. And the last thing I liked, there's a scene where Night of the Living Dead, the George A. Romero film, is playing a role in the background at the cinema, because Giorgio goes to see Gabriella and she's at the cinemas. I just really like that film being chosen, because you think of it, you pick up on everything that's in the film, and I've taught this film many times, so I have a lot of knowledge about Night of the Living Dead. And just when it came in, straight away I knew, cool, 1968, this fits the time perfectly of where they're at in the film. And also knowing that film, Night of the Living Dead, it's in the public domain, so a really cheap and easy way for the filmmakers to have that involved as well. And if you know that film, there's lots of the themes and ideas that this film is sort of touching on throughout as well. So I like that too. What didn't I like in this film? It's at the start, really. Giorgio, there's a scene where he's with his fellow engineers. They've all just finished their exams, so they're celebrating at this pub, and they're drinking lots, and they're chanting, and they're playing drinking games, and making fools of themselves, and chanting to kiss random girls. I understand, this is the 1960s, so it might have been part of the context, but a part of making a film in current society is that you sort of shut these things down, or shut that idea down and say that it's wrong. But they didn't comment on why this wasn't wrong, or why they didn't agree with it. So I just thought that was a little bit of a weird scene, to be honest. What's this film trying to say? Some themes, some ideas, some motifs. Obviously, governments, the Italian government in particular, but what they'll do to uphold their authority and their power. The Italian government, they don't like people standing up to them. They're happy to offer bribes, even when they think that what they're doing is the right thing, because they're helping their citizens. So that's an interesting little take. The backdrop of the 1960s, that idea, there's revolt across Europe, the Vietnam War's going on, there's that fear of communism, all those types of things. These are all important things that really could have supported this film and what the island represented. So they should have lent into this more, because I think they just dropped them in rather than connecting them. So that was a little bit sad, I guess. There's obviously the idea of rules and restrictions, and they can be seen to oppress imagination and creativity, and that idea of choosing the right thing to do over the law, but also following laws. How do you do that? Because freedom is something that's worth fighting for. That idea to dare to dream and escape the system and not follow the norm and try to change the world. So lots of good little things to take away from this film. The other takeaway for me, newspapers, television, the cinema, radio, they were all a big part in this story at various stages. I thought it was a really cool thing to reflect and look back on, how if this scenario happened today, like someone tried to create their own territory, how this would all be played out over social media rather than these dated media forms, I guess. So I thought that was really interesting too. We have a moment. Did I jump online to check? I had to go on and Google something. I had to look something up, because there's this scene we have this pregnant lady who arrives on the island, needs a job. She can't get a job on the mainland because she's pregnant, so she's like, I'll be a bartender on the island. And the scene where she works out that she's pregnant, she urinates in a cup and puts some washing detergent in there as well. I'd never heard of this, so I looked it up. My search history is probably going to be a bit whacked from that, but it looks like it's something that people do. I just thought that was a little bit weird. 1960s, I guess. Maybe that's how it happened. I'm not sure. Questions, ponderings, ideas. What else? They sell this as a comedy. I think it's a bit of a stretch, to be honest, because yes, there's moments that are humorous, but I would not classify this as a comedy. This is 100% a drama, so I think that they need to rework that. Maybe when they were selling this to Netflix, and at Netflix, they probably never even watched the film before they put it on their service, to be honest. The other thing, it's tough because, and I've touched on this at various stages, the real Giorgio, he never had this big reason for making the island. And it makes it hard because of this. There isn't, there's not one in the film either. So real life, no reason. Film, no reason. Other than sort of making a comment that maybe it's to do with his love interest, Gabrielle. And or maybe to that idea that nothing in life is going right for him. So it just makes it hard that you've got a 2-hour film and you want to support people, you want to cheer people, you want to see them succeed, but they don't have any real motive that they're pushing down your throat. So it's hard. It's like, okay, cool. You didn't actually have any grand plans for this island. You just wanted to show off and have a good time. So it gets destroyed. Okay. I don't know. It's hard. It's really hard. That's sort of my takeaway, I guess. I'm ready to wrap this up. Had a good chat about this film. We do give the films on this show a rating out of 5. For me, like, there's obviously those issues with the lack of motive or connection with the whole idea of the film, but I guess that's more on the real life story than the filmmakers, because they obviously didn't want to make a complete fantasy tale. Like they said, 85% of this is the truth. So, there's enough of this to like, especially if you're new to the story, know nothing about it. The performances are fine. It's an engaging story, so I'm giving it a 3.5 out of 5. That's 3.5 for me. Solid score. We're on socials. We've got Instagram, we've got Facebook, and we have X, formerly known as Twitter. The question that I wanted to put up for the posts for this episode: the idea, would you have requested for citizenship on Rose Island? Interesting thought. 1960s. Hippie culture, those sorts of things are happening. Is that something you do? Be like, cool, I'm going to stand up to authority and go, get a passport for this little island off the coast of Italy. Interesting thought. I don't know if I put myself in that situation, I still would probably say no, because I wouldn't even want to visit the island. I can't imagine how choppy and how unstable. We see this scene, obviously, where Giorgio stays the night on the island and gets battered by waves and storm and rain. For me, I just couldn't think of anything worse than being on this little tin piece of metal out in the middle of the ocean. I would just get seasick. So probably a no for me. Other than that, we are back next week. Next week, we are away from the international films for quite a while, but this is I feel like we've done a lot of international films. This one's an American film from 2020. It's a musical comedy called The Prom. This one's directed by Ryan Murphy. So Ryan Murphy has a big Netflix deal, but it stars Meryl Streep, James Corden, Nicole Kidman, Keegan-Michael Key, Andrew Reynolds, Joe Allen Pellman, Ariana DeBose, Tracy Ullman, Kevin Chamberlain, Mary Kay Place, and Kerry Washington. So a few cast members on there that we've seen in a few Netflix films over this journey of this podcast. I'm looking forward to that next week. I hope you are too. As always, thanks for joining me for this episode, and I'll see you next week.